I have an ult who's well spec'd in forge guns and swarms, so I've been playing from both sides of the AV versus vehicle war, and like many, I think that AV needs a design pass. However, while I do not approve of where they are right now in relation to dropships, I don't think that the issue is only to do with damage or range, which is what many people seem to focus on. It's the interplay between AV and dropships that's out of balance. In this video, I'm going to point out how the maps compound the problem that we have with AV, specifically dropships. This next bit is going to sound like every boring PowerPoint presentation or lecture you've ever had to sit through, but it's short, and then there will be some explosions, pretty maps, and an awesome shot of 3 dropships set against a beautiful orange sky, showing Dust at its best, so stay with me. I pointed out in my last 2 videos how AV players can engage us at ranges far in excess of our ability to detect them. I want to expand this further, as it's not simply an issue with rendering. The big issue, bigger than rendering, is the whole engagement process. The last 2 videos touched on identification and response. We cannot identify or respond to a player that does not become visible. Rendering issues make these parts of a dropship pilot's fight with AV impossible in many cases. Let's look at acquisition and how it relates to identification this time. AV is a big threat to pilots, as it should be, but there needs to be a balance between the AV player and the dropship pilot. Seeing vehicles or players is what I mean by acquisition, and then simply spotting what weapon they have, and if they're on your side, is part of the identification. Let's go to skirmish mode. This is line harvest, and a forge gunner, sorry, wrong picture, and a forge gunner has got himself into location here. Now this is an easy point to get to quickly from spawn. It also gives him cover from the direction the enemy will be coming from. It's not a good spot, but it's a workable spot. This is what he can see from that spot. But let's plot his field of view onto an overhead map. First, let's put him in. Then, let's plot a circle that represents 300 meters. That's the effective range of his gun. He can engage anything within this circle, but obviously his line of sight is hampered by buildings and the pipe. So let's change that to show only those areas he could realistically hit that are on the ground, like a tank. So if you're on the ground, there's cover, and the gunner has a good but limited area where he can hit you. But dropships operate in the air, so let's plot what he can see within range that is in the air. First, watch these dropships. You can see in this clip that they're at the height that is needed to avoid buildings and maintain safety from hand-thrown infantry grenades. This is a reasonable and standard operating height. Let's use that to plot the air zone the forge gun can hit, or effectively a swarmer too. As you can see, it's about 3 times as large. Dropship can be hit anywhere in this zone. Yes, you can duck behind buildings, but we are aerial craft and designed to operate in the air. Unless we knew we were being threatened by such a long-range weapon, we'd be in more danger to drop low, as it puts us in range of infantry AV grenades, plasma cannons, and mass drivers. Forge guns do need power to take on tanks, and I'm not complaining about that, but tanks are 1/3 as vulnerable to dropships based on the area of danger that I plotted on the map. This is the source of much imbalance where dropships and forge guns are concerned. Also look how he can cover, from this quite poor spot, the airspace over every single objective. But what if he was up on a tower? Let's put the gunner here. This is a spot that you can get to easily from spawn by using a dropship, and you often see players here in all game modes, including in PC. In game, from the forge gunner, or swarmer's perspective, it looks like this. So what is the forge gunners and swarmers coverage from this point? There is almost no zone where a dropship can be in a useful spot and be out of range of the AV. The AV here has covered every single objective. Let me highlight the only safe zone in green. Out of the whole map, where the objectives are, that is, this is the only safe spot. But what would happen if they were to embed themselves on the tabletop, right in the middle of the map? Happens less in skirmish, but very frequent on ambush. As you can see, the whole map is denied to dropships, so in some game modes, if you've got a forger, a single player on the map, airspace is gone. Let me quickly show you how I work this out so you don't think I have it wrong. I played on the map and went to this spot, pointed my gun at all these targets and noted the ranges. I was 301 meters from D, so I took that line, copied it, straightened it out, and used it as a radius to plot the circle. Line harvest does have bunched objectives, which does exacerbate the issue. But I'm also using 300 meters, difficult for a forge gun to hit at that range, but I've seen it done. At the same time, it's easy for a swarmer to get a lock on at 300 meters, normally more. Now if you remember this shot from the swarm lock-on suggestion video, you'll see I killed the swarmer, but he wasn't rendered. I used his missiles to guess where he was. This is the battle report from that game. He was my longest kill, so we can easily prove that 169 meters I can kill, but cannot see a target. But it's rare to kill at that distance. Most kills happen at about 70 meters. Let's take that tower AV player and plot 70 meters around him to show my most realistic engagement range, that, with the rendering issues and difficulty of aiming a turret, has a chance to actually kill him. Maxed out missiles do about 540 damage, so I'll need at least 2 direct hits on a forge gunner. 1 might deal with a swarmer, but it's usually 2, as direct hits are hard. Particularly because when you get hit by a swarm missile, you get knocked around so much, so you also have to factor in the time that you line up, get knocked off, have to line up your missiles again. Now imagine that there's a swarm launcher with his easy lock-on homing missiles. See how much red zone I have to pass through just to get close enough to engage him. He can easily get 2 volleys off before I even get in range. By the time I aim, at least a third, with plenty of time for a fourth when you factor in the fact that my ship will be rocking from the hits I'm taking. Another area of acquisition imbalance is the overhead map. Here I'm using a forge gun, and I died trying to kill a tank, so I have to respawn, but I can use the overhead map to search for the tank. Vehicles show up on maps regardless of scanning. There he is. Now I can use the nearest spawn point to the tank. There wasn't one that close this time, but in many matches I can pop back right in on top of them. This gives me a much easier time reacquiring my enemy. So what's my point? It's about the acquisition of a target. Everyone concentrates quite hard on range and damage, but we have to think about the larger picture. The biggest threats to me in a dropship are AV players. I often have to deal with them because they're less of a threat to infantry, so infantry leaves them till later when they feel safer. I should be able to fight back myself, and the engagement needs to be balanced, or at least allow me, or them, to tip the balance in either mine or their favour. But yet they can acquire and engage me far more easily than I can them. The maps allow them to easily see and hear me, yet they can remain hidden. Too much of the acquisition stage is in their favour. Greater range, easy farm to get weapons, knocking me off target when they hit me, yet they remain much steadier when I hit them. Lastly, the maps let them hit me whenever I get close to a useful position. We need ways to help us acquire them, yet remain unacquired ourselves. This is what they can do to us all too easily now. I think it would be a much more challenging and balanced environment where we can tip the balance either way by using tactics and skill and our teammates to change the acquisition balance. So give it some thought. I'll be posting more videos with a bit more detail on this and the other stages up and coming.